On the west edge of Omaha, Nebraska, stood a modest house with a gravel driveway and a mailbox that leaned slightly to the left. Lucas Bennett had never bothered to fix either. He drove a 9-year-old sedan, bought his morning coffee from the exact same gas station on Dodge Street every single day, and the cashier firmly believed he worked a mundane job in insurance. Lucas never corrected her. At 42 years old, Lucas had carefully constructed a life so thoroughly unremarkable that strangers forgot him within an hour of meeting him. That was entirely by design. To his neighbors, he was simply a quiet single father who worked from home, dabbling in numbers, airline data analysis, and delay patterns. What none of them knew was that 11 years earlier, in a cramped rented office situated above a dusty tire shop, Lucas had signed the incorporation papers for a company called Apex Aviation Group. Back then, it owned nothing more than a lease on 2 sputtering turboprops and a crushing mountain of debt. Now it controlled 4 regional carriers, a massive ground services division operating across more than 60 airports, a sprawling maintenance network, and a controlling stake in fuel logistics that supplied half the American Midwest. Yet, Lucas had structured his entire corporate empire so that his name appeared in exactly one place on the registry, buried deep beneath a holding company and a private trust. There was no photograph of him on any website. He had never granted a single interview. His chief of staff, Daniel Rohr, knew who he was, and the board of directors knew who he was. But the rest of the company operated under the assumption that the founder was merely a rumor. Lucas had chosen this path because he wanted to observe how the world truly treats a man who looks like nothing. It was, to him, the only honest way to measure an enterprise from the inside. The only person who had ever known the complete truth from day one was his mother. Margaret Bennett had been a widow for 26 years, raising Lucas alone in a rented duplex in Charleston, South Carolina, while working the front desk of a hotel that no longer existed. When those first 2 turboprops had been grounded for 4 months and Lucas couldn't make payroll, Margaret had wired him $11,000, every single dollar she had saved, without ever asking when she would be repaid. He had since paid it back 40 times over, but she had never brought it up again. Every Sunday she called just to ask about the weather in Nebraska and whether he was sleeping. She never asked about revenue, acquisitions, or board meetings, because she understood something no analyst ever grasped. The company wasn't the true achievement. The true achievement was that her son had stayed the exact same man. The final Sunday phone call had been entirely ordinary. She told him about a pesky leak in her kitchen ceiling and a neighbor's dog that barked at nothing. Lucas had promised to visit down south in the fall, and she had gently replied that fall was a long way off. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, his phone rang. It was a cousin he spoke to perhaps twice a year. A massive stroke had struck fast in the kitchen that morning. Paramedics had arrived in under 9 minutes, but it didn't matter. Margaret Bennett was gone. Lucas listened without interrupting, asked when the service would be held Thursday morning at the church on Ashley Avenue, and then set his phone down on the desk. He immediately checked the meteorological maps. A fierce storm system had boiled up off the Atlantic, stalling directly over the Carolinas. Computer models showed the coastal corridor collapsing late Wednesday night, plunging Charleston below landing minimums by the early hours, keeping it shut through Thursday and potentially into Friday. His own executive fleet was useless. Every single Apex airframe was either currently deployed on assignment or positioned east of the storm system, and any aircraft repositioning from the west would miss the coastal restrictions entirely. Daniel Rohr called him shortly after, offering to pull strings and move whatever needed moving. Lucas refused. If a man can't get to his mother's funeral on the system he built, Lucas told Rohr, then the system is broken, and I'd rather find out now. There was one commercial seat left on the only itinerary that could possibly work. Northline Airways, an Apex subsidiary, flying out of Omaha on Wednesday evening, connecting through Atlanta, and landing late at night in Charleston. It gave him a solid margin before the funeral. Lucas booked the very last available seat under his own name, Seat 27C, paid with a personal card, packed a black suit, a white shirt, and a tie, and headed straight for the airport. The Omaha terminal was packed with frustrated travelers as weather began chewing up flight schedules nationwide. Lucas stood quietly in the security line wearing a simple gray jacket and worn-out boots, carrying a single travel bag. Nobody gave him a second glance. At Gate 14, he sat quietly and watched the ground crews. Having spent 11 years reading these exact movements as cold data, he now watched them simply as a grieving son waiting to bury his mother. Then, Vanessa Cole arrived. Accompanied by 3 associates, Vanessa was a wealthy, high-powered businesswoman in her early 40s, wearing a tailored charcoal coat and moving through the concourse with an air of absolute entitlement. She walked straight up to the gate agent, Claire Donovan, and demanded a 4th seat, claiming she and her partners desperately needed to sit together to finish a crucial business presentation. Claire politely explained that the flight was completely sold out. Vanessa told her to make it happen, ordering an announcement for volunteers. The public address announcement went out offering hotel vouchers and compensation, but no one moved. Every single passenger at that gate was fleeing the same closing weather trap. Scanning the seating area like a hawk evaluating merchandise, Vanessa's eyes landed squarely on Lucas. She walked over and uninvitedly sat down in the empty chair beside him. "You're 27C," she said. "My row is 27A, B, and D. You're the hole in the middle. I have 4 people and hours in the air. Name a number." Lucas calmly told her the seat wasn't for sale, explaining that he was flying to his mother's funeral the next morning and that this was literally the last plane that could make it before the airport closed down. Vanessa flashed a cold, calculated smile. "Everything is for sale," she declared. $2,000. When Lucas quietly refused, she raised the stakes. $5,000, she pressed, promising to have her office book him on a first-class flight the next morning with a chauffeured car waiting. Lucas looked out the window and repeated gently, "There won't be a flight tomorrow morning. The airport will be closed." Growing frustrated, Vanessa snapped, "Then take the money and take the risk. That's what the rest of us do." Lucas turned, looked her dead in the eye, said a quiet no, and turned back to the window. Without another word, Vanessa marched back to the counter, placed her phone face down, and demanded the name of the duty station manager. What followed over the next few minutes was cold, calculated corporate procedure wielded as a weapon. Vanessa made 2 quick phone calls to influential contacts, and shortly after, a shift manager named Trevor Doyle emerged from the operations door. After a brief whispered exchange with Vanessa, Doyle marched behind the counter and initiated a fraudulent review of Lucas's ticket. He claimed that a one-way ticket purchased close to departure by a lone passenger matched a security screening profile, giving the airline the right to suspend transport pending review. Claire Donovan tried to protest, whispering that the passenger had never consented and the ticket was fully confirmed, but Doyle brushed her aside. The manager informed Lucas that his reservation had officially been canceled, promising a refund in a few business days. Vanessa's assistant immediately stepped forward to claim the newly freed seat. Lucas didn't yell. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply picked up his bag and walked over to Claire Donovan at the scanner. "You have a compliance tab in the corporate directory," he whispered quietly. "Under it, there's an ownership registry. I'm asking you to open it and look up the controlling owner of Northline Airways. 2 clicks. That's all I'm asking." When Claire hesitated, Lucas walked to the main customer service desk and asked Supervisor Bethany Kroll to run the exact same verification. Bethany dismissed him, looking away toward the concourse where Trevor Doyle and Vanessa Cole were watching mockingly. Vanessa laughed lightly, remarking to the crowd, "In my experience, a man who refuses $5,000 isn't looking for money, he's looking for an audience." A few people chuckled. Lucas kept both hands flat on the counter, ignoring the whispers, and demanded the verification be run. Doyle threatened to call airport security. "Call them," Lucas replied steadily. Unbeknownst to Doyle, Claire Donovan had already run the verification from her terminal, compelled by the precise terminology Lucas had used. Beneath his name was a strict compliance flag. Individuals' travel is not to be disclosed to station personnel without written authorization. Claire stared at the screen, her heart dropping into her stomach. Trained to escalate compliance breaches, she instantly forwarded the alert to the station director and the executive duty line. Within moments, alarms sounded across the executive channels. Up on the second level, station director Raymond Gallagher froze when he heard the news. Miles away, the CEO saw her phone light up during a quarterly review, bolted out of the conference room, and rushed to a secure line. Down on the main concourse, an airport police officer had just finished checking Lucas's driver's license, politely advising him to step away from the counter. Suddenly, Raymond Gallagher burst through the operational doors, flanked by operations supervisors and terminal managers, moving with frantic urgency. He swept past Vanessa, past Doyle, and stopped dead in front of Lucas Bennett. "Mr. Bennett," Gallagher said. Every single person within 30 feet went completely silent. Gallagher turned furiously toward Trevor Doyle and Bethany Kroll. "Reinstate it. Now." Bethany frantically typed, and within moments the reservation returned to confirmed status. Doyle stared blankly at the tablet Gallagher thrust into his hands, watching the plain gray ownership record scroll before his eyes. The color drained entirely from Doyle's face as he realized the catastrophic mistake he had made. The silence rippled outward through the terminal. Vanessa Cole turned slowly, staring at the simple gray jacket, the worn boots, and the single bag on the floor. "You own it?" she whispered in disbelief. Lucas calmly replied that he owned the parent company, and that he had been sitting at gate 14 for hours simply because he needed to bury his mother. Right then, Gallagher's phone rang. The CEO was on the line, her voice echoing loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. She apologized profusely, offering immediate suspensions and firings for everyone involved. Lucas listened, then uttered words that shocked everyone. "Nothing," he said. "Not tonight. No one is to be suspended or escorted out. Let the woman in the charcoal coat and her colleagues board in the seats they bought. The only thing I want from Northline Airways is the same thing any passenger wants, to be allowed onto my aircraft. My mother is being buried tomorrow morning. That's the entire problem. Everything else is a memo, and memos can wait." He picked up his bag, walked to gate 14 where Claire Donovan handed him his boarding pass with a tearful apology, and walked down the jet bridge into seat 27C. Vanessa and her partners boarded quietly behind him. Flight 290 pushed back and climbed into the night sky. But the weather off the Carolinas had other plans. Instead of holding off, the storm accelerated violently, plunging Charleston into zero visibility convection and forcing the airport to shut down its arrivals completely. When their connecting flight landed, every remaining option to reach Charleston was dead. Interstates were flooded, and driving was impossible. Daniel Rohr called with a desperate proposal: charter a twin-engine Challenger jet, risking a dangerous marginal instrument approach into Charleston under active weather minimums. Lucas listened to the wind shear reports and low ceilings. He asked the hardest question of all: would the crew be volunteering or being pressured by authority? Rohr hesitated, admitting the pilots knew who was asking. "It's exactly the same," Lucas said, refusing to use his power to endanger lives. He formally canceled the charter, choosing to sit through the rest of the cold night in a plastic chair in the empty concourse, reflecting on his mother's sacrifices, her unconditional love, and the 11-year journey of his company. Vanessa Cole stayed nearby, sharing quiet coffee and reflecting on the hollow nature of ruthless corporate ambition. Just before dawn, the weather pattern unexpectedly shifted, pulling a narrow, clear gap through the storm. Charleston popped back above minimums. A seasoned Apex captain named Alan Whitaker, who had tragically buried his own father alone years prior, while his airline refused to help voluntarily, stepped forward with First Officer Nora Kessler. They inspected the data independently and called the duty desk. "If you can't take those terms, we don't go," Whitaker told Lucas over the radio line. "I buried my father. I've had years to think about what I'd do if I ever got the chance to be on the other side of that." Lucas authorized the flight strictly under the captain's independent command authority. The Challenger jet cut through the turbulent morning skies, touching down safely on the Charleston tarmac just before the weather window slammed shut. A car was waiting. Lucas changed into his black suit in the back seat as they raced toward the church. When he arrived at the cemetery, the pastor saw him coming and gently held the service right where it stood, giving the grieving son a chance to say goodbye. "My mother gave me $11,000 when $11,000 was all she had," Lucas told the small gathering at the graveside. "She never asked for it back. Everything I built was built with that money. I spent the last days learning I'd been trying to tell her the wrong thing all along. The thing I should have told her was that she had been right about me before there was any evidence, and I've been trying to deserve it ever since." The months that followed brought profound structural changes. Lucas opened a sweeping, unsparing independent audit across all Apex carriers. Trevor Doyle was permanently terminated for repeatedly abusing emergency codes against vulnerable passengers. Claire Donovan was promoted to a newly created executive position called Compliance Lead, a job specifically designed to hold the authority to say no to corrupt corporate management. Vanessa Cole published a public statement owning up to her ruthless behavior, made full restitution to affected passengers, and voluntarily stepped down from her firm's board. Most importantly, Lucas established Homeward Wings, a permanent foundation funded entirely by Apex that guaranteed protected, uncancelable seats on every flight for individuals facing family emergencies, ensuring no struggling passenger would ever be turned away by corporate greed again. Lucas returned to the modest house on the west edge of Omaha with the leaning mailbox. He didn't fix it. He still bought his morning coffee at the same gas station, and the cashier still believed he worked in insurance. He kept his anonymity, not to hide, but because he now knew a profound truth. Money can open every door in a terminal in minutes, but decency, integrity, and the plain refusal to treat another human being as an obstacle are the only things that truly make a person worthy of the doors they walk through. Thank you so much for watching today's story. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Solo Dad Stories for more touching tales about family, dignity, and second chances. Let us know in the comments below which moments stayed with you the most. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.